Welcome to Crypto Sapiens, a show that hosts lively discussions with innovative Web3 builders to help you learn about decentralized money systems, including Ethereum, Bitcoin, and DeFi. The podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only, and it is not financial advice. Crypto Sapiens is presented in partnership with Bankless DAO, a movement for pioneers seeking freedom from the limitations of the traditional financial system. Bankless DAO will help the world go bankless by creating user-friendly on-ramps for people to discover decentralized financial technologies through education, media, and culture. Hi everyone, I'm your host, Humpty Calderon, and today I'm chatting with Punia, product lead at Set Protocol and Index Coop. We explore Index Coop and the importance of creating accessible entry points for crypto, such as decentralized asset management funds. We also take a look at some of the revolutionary processes that DAOs are experimenting with to improve collaboration and coordination. So let's get started.
I'm Punia. I'm from New York City, and really, it might be because of my immigrant background, but I deeply believe in the necessity of each of us to find our place. And I kind of think of place on three different axes, like physical, emotional, and spiritual. But I think that's a really important thing, and what drives me, because finding the right place kind of creates deep harmony between us and the universe, and kind of out of that harmony, we're able to live much more vivid, beautiful, and impactful lives. And that's really what got me so passionate about Web3, because I think kind of what Web3 enables is really awesome coordination, like we've never been able to do so before. And the end game of coordination, in my opinion, is really helping everyone find their place, and for us as a species to really awaken. And so currently today I'm a PM at Set Protocol, which is this DeFi asset management startup. And we helped, I was on the team that kind of helped launch Index Coop, which is a DAO we started on top of our protocol that kind of consumes our services. And within the Index Coop, I've really been involved in setting up the community and more recently, leading product and helping build up the product and engineering organizations.
Yeah, so what is Set Protocol, and how did that inspire Index Coop?
Sure, yeah. Set Protocol is basically asset management on Ethereum. So we basically create ways by which people can create decentralized asset management funds and have some confidence that the person is not just going to run away with their capital. And our funds have really interesting properties that are uniquely enabled by Ethereum, which is each fund is tokenized as an ERC20, so you can actually trade a fund as you would an index fund, short it, leverage long it, and do all these kind of cool things that make it really composable with the rest of the kind of DeFi ecosystem. And really where we were as Set Protocol is we've been trying, we've kind of had this really powerful underlying software, and we've been trying to figure out different ways to go to market with it. DeFi summer happened. We saw wow, for the first time in crypto, there was this emergent genre. There was this kind of class of tokens, these DeFi governance tokens. And for the first time, there's really something, there's this investable category on Ethereum, and we could really create these index funds, which we've thought about for some time. And in creating those index funds, we thought it was a better fit for an organization built on top of us than for us to do directly. And so with some of that kind of thinking, we decided to really spin up the and it really started off as an experiment. We weren't really sure how it was going to go, but it ended up blooming into one of the most beautiful DAOs that I've seen.
Yeah, that's really great. So in terms of Index Coop, it sounds like it functions like a DAO, and versus Set Protocol is more of a traditional
That's accurate.
organization, yep. Right? Yeah, well, that's cool. So as a product manager at Index Coop, what's your function, I guess, in the DAO, and what are some of the things that you're working on right now?
Sure, yeah. Within the DAO, as many of you all can probably relate, your hats are numerous and they change often. I started off helping out with marketing and setting up working groups and kind of these DAO operations. But somewhere around midsummer, we realized that Index Coop is it's a beast, and it wants to like own its own products and own its own engineering, and it doesn't want to depend on kind of like Set's product and engineering knowledge. And so when that happened, we started pursuing this kind of idea of engineering and product autonomy more seriously. And so my role really transitioned into over like, okay, how can we get like the right like kind of product people, the right engineers? How do we have them communicate? How do you do like sprint planning and pods and stuff like that? The agile process within like a DAO. And so really my role today is helping kind of create that structure and bringing on like the right leaders to help like propagate it and take it to the next level.
Such a tough, but such an incredible job because of the fact that one, yeah, you're helping to kind of frame these systems, but it's so valuable, right? In order for a DAO to function properly, there needs to be like these systems, these rails for people to kind of plug in and just
Totally. And like we're realizing just how important those rails are. Like not only are they like important for like new people onboarding, but they're also kind of important for people already within the DAO to have trust with each other because they kind of know like what somebody else is doing and how to work with them. And yeah, it's weird how like this emergent structure actually ends up being like super, super useful.
So what I guess in terms of like what Set Protocol, Index Co-op, what they're doing, and comparing that to like TradFi, what is like a good example, I guess, a good parallel to what like is being done at these projects compared to like in traditional finance, and why or how is that better?
Yeah, I think like how it really boils down to it is accessibility. And accessibility is like really, really important. You can think of like being able to access like the economic markets we're a part of as like the way by which one person is able to benefit from the upside in like the society within which they participate. Like for example, like me holding like the S&P 500 is like the mechanism by which like I have upside into like the general improvement of like the US economy. And without having that like access, like it kind of like isolates me and it isolates my work. And that's kind of why you see such giant like wealth gaps that are beginning to emerge, or at least that's one of the potential reasons why you end up seeing like these large gaps emerge. And so what we do differently is really this kind of like point on accessibility. As with composable DeFi structures, accessibility means like a lot of things. Though like the ones that we can kind of lean on are like one, like anybody from anywhere in the world can access now like the DeFi market through like the DPI, or the metaverse market through like the MBI, or like the data economy, the data index. And there's no such like gates that exist anymore. They can even do it for like super gas if they want to do so on Polygon. And that's really powerful. That like really binds us together all around the world into sharing upside into this new revolution that's kind of happening. On the second side, like we also enable like methodologists with like powerful ideas to help like construct these products and bring their visions to life, and be able to provide like a lot of these things like secondary market liquidity that are very, very hard to do TradFi very, very quickly. Like for us, like one thing we often hear is like when talking to TradFi people is that it typically takes like a few years for like an index fund or an ETF to reach like $100 million in AUM. And that's like the quickest it typically happens. And for us, I think we got to $100 million in like months. Now we're at some 400, 500 million really quickly. And I think that's because of just the accessibility and flexibility that we really offer.
This is all the funds on Index Co-op or one particular product?
I think cumulatively, I'm not sure what the number is specifically, but it typically ranges between 0 to 500 million. Yeah.
Wow, that's impressive. So you touched on two things here. So let's unpack that. You were talking about DPI, MVI. You also were talking about methodologists. Walk us through, what is a methodologist? How are they? How do you find them, and what is their role?
This is actually kind of an interesting question because it's something that we're actually trying to make really explicit because we're kind of being tested as to like what that specifically means. But in the general case, like a methodologist is somebody that has some unique insight onto the market and some unique kind of like distribution mechanism. But what they don't have is like technological backend or the legal like regulatory clarity to actually be able to like leverage those two things. And so what we provide to methodologists is a way by which they can actually turn their like vision into an actual product that people can invest in, where they don't actually have to do any of the operations or bear any of the legal risk. They kind of act as a oracle that submits like a data feed, and we, as like the Index Coop, really implement it and turn it into like a product. And so that's kind of like the relationship there. Like we realize there's like a whole world of like people that like don't understand crypto or technology, and they don't need to. Like that's our job, and we can like provide that service to them, and we can help them create these like really beautiful and magical products. And we've been able to do so with like kind of a whole host of like really different methodologist profiles, including Bankless DAO.
Yeah, so you talked about not need like there being people that aren't familiar, or they're not necessarily the most proficient with crypto, but they don't need to be. In terms of like what Index Co-op is doing with these indexes like DPI, BED, MVI, like how are these like what was I guess the thought process to making them or developing these indexes, and what's their role in making crypto more accessible?
Yeah, like oftentimes we're just it's kind of a two-way conversation between the methodologists. Like we try to do our own insight in understanding like the market, to try to like understand where the most friction is and where that friction can be solved through technology. Like the DPI, for example, was like something that was like very clear to like a lot of members of the set team that, hey, like we see this thing emerging, we want to invest in, but we're like working at a startup, like we don't have time to like really follow all these like tokens and trends and whatnot. And so we try to like have that insight ourselves, like in-house, and do our work. But we also depend heavily on methodologists that come to us and with like kind of their insights as well. And so like product decisions are really collaborative with the methodologist, and the work done there. And that's like the way to do it. Like it's like collaborativeness and openness and communication always produces like the kind of the best outcomes. And so that's really like how we decide to pursue like the products that we end up pursuing. In terms of like what they really provide to people is really just like simplicity and like safety. Like those core values mean so much to people that like only understand crypto from like a surface level, because like if you're just like going into crypto the first time, like it does not feel safe and it does not feel simple. And so we're actually able to serve as like the abstraction layer over all of that, which is really what asset management does, and package it up really neatly for a person to then consume. Like there's so many funny stories on our forums about like people getting like their grandparents like to buy like the product, and it's a super digestible kind of context. Like, hey, this tracks this market, and you don't have to worry about anything. You don't have to worry about taxes, bounces. You don't have to like really worry about like what assets are going in or going out. Like we kind of take care of all that for you.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I think, well, I guess first of all, before I get into DPI, or why I like it, what is the oldest index or the first index that was built on Index Co-op?
Yeah, it's the DPI. The DPI was actually built before we even launched like the co-op. But it was the first product that like the Index Co-op took on.
Would you say that then DPI kind of sparked the coup?
It totally did, yeah.
Yeah, there was a need for it then, like for there to be a separate entity to manage, I guess, this process.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
That makes sense. Yeah, I mean, for me, I am a fan of DPI because for everything that you said moments ago, which is, what for those of us who are in this space and we're building, and maybe just for everyone, just generally, it's really hard to keep track of everything that's going on in the market, but we still want to, tap into the market in some way and, I guess, take advantage of some of the value that we're building into this ecosystem, right? And so, what better way than something like an index that can get a lot of that upside too, across the entire market. So yeah, I'm a big fan of that. And certainly I think indexes are going to continue playing a big role in making crypto easier. And another one for that exact reason is MVI, right? I think that the metaverse tokens certainly are valuable in the sense that they're incredibly novel and emergent, at least the technology that's being built around them. But unlike DeFi, I think that they still haven't gained that like massive momentum, right? Where there's potential growth still, or not, well, there's still definitely, I think, potential growth into those ecosystems. And so to be able to like track that growth, I think is super interesting and valuable with like the MVI token.
Absolutely. The thing we kind of struggle with tokens like the MBI and these kind of like more niche trends is the underlying liquidity of like the tokens that make the index. Like that tends to be a bit of a choke point. But we're like thinking even bigger than like indexes. Like I think like we're super good at like abstracting complexity, and we can do that in like a variety of cases. Like something that we were really exploring with synthetics over the summer was like making it easy for like somebody to be a staker on their platform and not have to worry about like the debt risk. Like that was an interesting kind of opportunity that we saw that was like a little bit different from like indexes, but was able to deliver like a very deep like value prop to a certain small group of crypto users in a very powerful way. So we're really excited about this like general opportunity to really abstract away complexity and provide like this safety.
Yeah. Well, and I like that the tokens or these indexes that are getting built, there's like a link or some sort of alignment with the people that are helping to develop these, with the methodologists, right? So as an example, the BED index, or the BED token, that is a composite of Bitcoin, Ethereum, and DeFi. And I believe that is balanced equally. I think it's like 33% across all of them. But what I find interesting in that is that, I think the Bankless mission, right, is to help people go bankless and facilitate education in Bitcoin, Ethereum, and DeFi. So it just feels like that is a sensible move for a project like Bankless to make, and to develop a token that aligns closely to its mission to make this space more accessible and easier to participate in.
I gotta tell you, like working with DAOs and protocols is the most fun for me because it's like wow, we're like we're creating our own party. Like it's awesome.
So I am expecting then a DAO index in the future. Maybe you're already working that, and you don't have to drop alpha if you don't want to, but I think that there's probably value in that because there are so many DAOs that have sprung up, many of them tokenized as well. So, and certainly I think a lot of them are really building tremendous value into the space and technology themselves.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And hopefully, I know our pods I've been exploring that kind of theme for quite some time, and hopefully we'll have some news and updates for you guys coming soon.
All right. Well, I didn't pull any alpha out of you, but that's fine. We'll move on. So, what is the structure of the Index DAO? You were talking about pods just now. What are some of the, I guess, different working groups within the DAO?
Yeah, it's been pretty like interesting to see how it's all like really emerged. One of the first things that emerged from like the early months of like the coup was this idea of like different tiered levels of contributors. And that was to kind of like gamify a little bit like this aspect of contributing to the coup, and also to make kind of like this idea of giving rewards a little bit simpler and more structured. From the tiered owls, we kind of uh, came up with this, or we didn't come up with it. We created this idea of like a working group, which was kind of a subgroup within a DAO with like a specific mandate and a specific time by which it like needs to get reinstated again. And we thought it was really important to kind of attach like a time horizon to like a specific group, just so that like we could have these like quick, well-defined iteration cycles. And the working group stuff was really inspired by Peter Pan and a lot of the work that he's done with Metacartel. Basically, when we kind of realized we really needed to become an independent product and engineering organization, we took a lot of like learnings from the kind of agile software development by the storm, and create these like kind of cross-functional pods that are these executional engines that exist. So like traditionally, like before pods, like if for example to launch bed, we had to get a request from design, like we basically sent it to like the design working group. They became a black box and they gave it back to us at some point, and that was a pretty messy process. So instead, we create these like pods, which are these teams that you'll have somebody from product, somebody from engineering, somebody from design, analytics, or whatever. And you'll have them kind of consistently working together and having ownership of a specific kind of product line. And so today we have two. We have like the leverage indices pod, which is led by Afromac, and they kind of own everything around like the leverage indices that we have going on. And the simple indices pod owned by Doc Habanero, which is indices like DPI, MVI, and BED. And so that was kind of a real step function in our capacity to make an impact. And we're really trying to define like what the future of the organization looks like from here. Like we're running into like several challenges regarding like funding and contributor onboarding and stuff like that are going to push us to define kind of new elements of structure. We're going to try to do it a bit proactive instead of reacting. But it's going to be like really cool. Just to kind of see like what comes next. Like so thus far, we've gotten a lot of inspiration from traditional software companies, but I think now we're really gonna have to start like innovating on our own.
Yeah. So it sounds like then the DAO has like this pool of talent that contributes in specific areas like design and maybe some sort of technological innovation and marketing. But these pods kind of gather individual contributors or people who I guess are specialized to be able to move quicker and build faster.
Exactly. Yeah. Through this kind of sharing of context and knowledge that they each represent.
Oh, that's great. I've certainly I can see how that could be a much better way to work. I think DAOs are just by nature, at least at their current stage, very messy. Because there's just a lot of people who are working while towards a common goal. They are working asynchronously, right? And so a lot of times that can cause some chaos and confusion in terms of who's doing what and when can we get something completed by. So to be able to hold a group of people accountable for something is probably better than holding an individual accountable for something.
Yeah, and symmetrically, accountability needs to come with ownership. So giving people real like a chance to like really have an impact is super powerful.
That's interesting. This is the second time I hear the word ownership in terms of DAOs. I think yesterday I read a tweet by Chase Chapman, and she mentioned something about like the value in DAOs is ownership of it, that people can own something and own processes. What is ownership? What do you think ownership is in terms of like DAOs and individual contributions?
Yeah, this may be like an incorrect framing, but I kind of view ownership as a natural extension of freedom, which is kind of something that we crave. Like ownership really just means the freedom to like explore and do what you want with something. Like so, for example, with like these pods, right? Like they get input, but they ultimately get to decide what like the product roadmap has, what the product roadmap is for their product lines, and they submit that to like kind of they decide kind of what the content roadmap is, and the opportunity to be kind of like free in that regard, I think is like very deeply like emotionally and intellectually satisfying, um, and it really is useful for us because when people are like deeply emotionally and intellectually satisfied, they do great work. So it's truly like this kind of amazing one.
So, what does fluid hierarchies mean at the DAO?
Yeah, and this is certainly kind of going into my own personal philosophy, but I think where like DAOs are able to differ from traditional organizations is that like I think hierarchies are inevitable and not bad, right? Like we have some conception of hierarchies being bad because we're mostly used to like what are called like power hierarchy, which are these like violence or domination or status oriented like hierarchy, that can make us feel like disempowered or worse off. But there's like another host of hierarchies that we can think about, like kind of like growth hierarchies. Like for example, you're a much better interviewer than I am, and that's great. And that adds a lot. You being better than me at that adds a lot of value to my life. Similarly, like we have these innate like hierarchies within us, and what DAOs let us do is to have these hierarchies kind of be created and fully disbanded as they're like called upon. And so I think like right now, like a lot of the chaos that we see in DAOs is because we're trying really hard to kind of attach a lot of like old school kind of thinking and organization building to like this new model where it's like not quite gonna work. I think we need to like draw a lot more inspiration from nature. It's kind of like how nature operates. Like it converges and diverges, converges, and it's like this kind of natural adaptive pattern that makes it really resilient and produces like really impressive outcomes. So similar with DAOs, I think see this trend of converging and diverging of like several hierarchies that pop up to tackle problems whenever they occur within DAOs. And so that's really what I think defines like a DAO and how it's an institution of an organization.
What is an example of, I guess, these hierarchies in nature that DAOs can try to imitate?
I think the most fascinating one are like fungi.
Okay.
Like
It's not like a guy with two thumbs pointing at himself, right?
not quite. Like I don't know if you've seen that documentary, like Fantastic Fungi, but this kind of like system, like this class of beings create like basically if you go into a forest and you take a step, like below each step is like 300 million or 300 meters or some crazy number of these mycelial like neural connections that connect like plants and trees that allow them to exchange kind of nutrients and the like, and it kind of creates these like really flexible and resilient organizations that can kind of respond to like changes in nutrient availability of plants, invasive species, stuff like that. And I think it's a great example of, and then they could also kind of like disband as needed to. And I think it's like a really cool example, like in nature of how these networks exist. And they're called like mycelial networks. There's a fantastic documentary called Fantastic Fungi that you guys should totally check out.
Yeah, I through the fantastic suggestions of my Firefox browser, I was introduced to an article that was talking about fungus networks, mycelial networks, and was interested in. I found it interesting, and I guess first of all, I was wondering if it got suggested because of DAOs, because of the coordination and communication networks that are getting built now, and maybe that was a bit of a hint, like, hey, take a look at this, or try to replicate organic systems. But yeah, I thought that was really interesting in terms of how they're connected and how they communicate. So, what is the what is the way that governance is run on the Index Co-op, and what are kind of some ways that people participate in it today?
Yeah, in all honesty, right now, one of the things I'm working on in Index 2.0 is really trying to define like a vision for governance. Like as governance is today, like basically all decisions that don't have social consensus or at least very clear social consensus fall into like this kind of IIP pattern that needs to get like voted on. And it kind of works okay, but it's like pretty inefficient and it's really hard to kind of for other people to understand, like especially new people onboarding. So like one of the things that we're really trying to like work on is like a vision for governance, kind of like what Yearn 2.0 has with this idea of constrained delegation. Um, and so yeah, so right now we basically have like these structures, the working groups and pods, and anything that can't be solved within those like work groups essentially goes to governance, and that's a system fix.
Yeah, governance is hard. And I think probably more so finding, what is soft governance, like what can be, solved through like some sort of social signaling, and what needs to go into some sort of like, like hard governance, voting structure. I think those are like a lot of the things that are currently a lot of DAOs and anything, I guess, with some sort of like token governance is trying to solve. What are some other ways that you think that governance can potentially be, how I guess, how can community decisions be made? How can that signaling and that decision making be made more fluid, I guess, for lack of a better word?
Totally. I'm deeply, deeply just inspired by Yearn. Track, who's kind of like the head of ops there, is one of my intellectual idols. And so whenever I face that question, I just draw a lot of inspiration from constrained delegation, which is this idea that like governance should only be used to like kind of delegate or take away power, essentially. And in like cases where like the organization is functioning to like the stakeholders it represents, you actually don't see any governance. And I just think that's like a very kind of powerful idea. I think at the like we don't really have a sense of do we want to do constrained delegation versus like kind of the Spartan Council idea that synthetics is. But I personally think that like using governance for that kind of express purpose, super super powerful. I don't think governance works, especially in DAOs that produce software where you have to like vote each product or vote on each like hiring decision. Like that's just a bad experience, I think, for the DAO and for like the token holders. So I'm really excited to change that.
All right. So what does the future hold for Index Co-op? I know we touched on a little bit in terms of like continuing to add more indexes. We're talking a little bit about governance, but what are some of the things that are on the roadmap and that you're excited for?
Yeah, I mean, like, the aspects of it that at this point, it's such a complex organization. The aspects of it that I'm most intimately involved with and excited about are really around like organization and product and engineering. So like, each week by week, we're getting like much more like a product and engineering organization that produces software, and we're able to really do some R&D on some really cool products. So like what you see today with like these kind of like sector indices and like these fly products, like we're going to go far beyond that. Like there's so much of DeFi that we can build on and abstract the complexity away from. And there's so many like interesting protocols that have kind of approached us to be like really a UI for them. Be like the simple kind of one product stop by which they can offer their services in their entirety to like the mainstream audience that they want to target. And so there's a lot of like really kind of cool things that are going to be happening there. On the organizational front, I think as an organization, like what we're really understanding is that like we've been really, really good at processing and operations, but we've missed like a lot of the soft side of what it means, like bring people together. Like, people are really binded by a shared fiction, storytelling. And so we're trying to understand what Index Coop story is. Why are we doing what we're doing? To like what end? What does that mean? And we're trying to really focus on understanding that culture. Focusing, really deeply on the person that that is a part of a DAO, as opposed to thinking of DAO as like this factory that products. We're really an ecosystem. We have to recognize kind of complete humans, and a DAO needs to really be able to, address each part of like what it means for like a human to be happy. So anyways, so like well, I'm really excited for like the org to explore like this soft side of organizational building, and I'm really excited for like product and engineering org to really have like the capacity to really amazing R&D and produce products way beyond like what a current suite.
Yeah, no, you just put a smile on my face. So I really like that perspective of, trying to identify who is a member of your DAO and how they find happiness, right? I mean, because if we're not asking those questions now, I think as DAOs grow, I think it's going to be a lot more difficult in the future to ask these questions. The other thing I think also is that we're at such an early stage. I mean, for everything in crypto, but DAOs especially, that I think that maybe right now DAOs are trying to really serve everyone where they don't necessarily need to. I think that DAOs will eventually find a way to specialize and occupy a space and add value to that space and to their communities, to the people that are members of their DAOs. And so people will have an opportunity to join multiple DAOs because each DAO will kind of represent a different piece of their identity.
That's a beautiful world. Yeah. And that's really going to require like a lot of coordination from people like you guys that are really bringing new people into crypto. So yeah, but like that vision itself is incredibly awesome.
Yeah, and incredibly difficult, I think, also because inter-DAO communications are hard. Intra-DAO communications are impossible right now, I think. I don't think that DAOs are necessarily communicating very well with one another. And so I think a lot of the problems in coordination are also happening because we are not being very efficient with the work that's being produced inside of DAOs and then kind of sharing that outside of to support other DAOs as well.
Yeah, and like what's cool is that like even with all that inefficiency, we're growing and we're attracting more and more talent and like stuff's like working.
Yeah. But I think that's credit goes to the number of people that have found value in this space and maybe just didn't have a place before and now have found a home in the fact that A, they're able to contribute, but B, they're able to be supported and find recognition for their contributions.
Yeah, I think that's like actually a pretty powerful frame. That's probably like the most rewarding aspect about being like a leader in a DAO, which is being able to like take these people from like these really just like unimaginably different and diverse backgrounds, and just seeing what happens when you give them support and give them trust, and like the kind of magical stuff that they can end up doing. Like one of our earliest contributors, his name's Overanalyzer, was like a product lead, and now is really focused on liquidity. He used to be like a chemist and like a chemical engineer and all that stuff. And like there's a lot of amazing things that can happen when you believe in people and you trust people and you give people resources to succeed. And I think DAOs are just unleashing this like latent talent because DAOs understand that organizations are comprised of complete individuals, whereas previous companies thought of organizations as factories, and it doesn't matter who you are as a person because hey, your job is just like I don't know, like cut this piece of metal or something very constrained, and you're just part of it.
Yeah, you're right. You couldn't bring your identity to the workplace because that didn't matter. You had to bring a very particular and very small subset of who you were, or maybe just a niche skill set that you learned that really had nothing to do with who you are.
Exactly. No, that was framed much more concisely and perfectly. And if there's like a quick tangent, like I think that's kind of the problem with modern system. Like we're training kids to really fit into this model of factories, which is as you described, like your identity doesn't matter, your niche skill matters. I think that's why so many people are falling out of that system. So, one thing I'd like to do with my life at some point is to really kind of change that educational paradigm.
100%. Hey, when you decide to get started on that, I'm happy to join you. That's my life mission too, is to change education. My wife's actually a teacher, and her and I have these discussions at length. She's also really tired of the education system, and she's also wanting to start her entrepreneur journey to see how she can change that. But certainly, I think that there are things that we can take away from the way that DAOs are working today, and maybe applying that to the way that we can teach the next generation too.
Hell yeah. That's going to be like, we're talking about bringing down banks. Like, man, we're going to bring down like schools and universities.
They're next. I think a lot of these institutions are built on really archaic models. And we have an opportunity right now to really revolutionize everything. And the beauty of it is, like I said, there's just so many people that are eager to support this. And I think a lot of the reasons because they feel like the system may not have, failed them really, right? And they're looking to find a better way, not just for themselves, but for everyone and for the people that are coming right behind them, our children.
Yeah, I think the kids' point is like super important. Something MetaDreamer says that's like really cool. Kids are kind of how we coordinate into the future. So, setting them up like well and change these institutions so that they're not like lost or cheated by the system is like the most important thing we can do.
And that's all we have for today. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. And if you'd like to learn more about Index Coop, please go to indexcoop.com and on Twitter at indexcoop. Thanks for listening to Crypto Sapiens. Please give us a follow, like, and a 5-star review wherever you enjoy your podcasts. And stay tuned for our next discussion.